call Gareth Hughes and remind the House that we're looking for new and novel and creative contributions.
No pressure, that's right. Mr. Chair, I rise to support this legislation, and I agree with the member David Cunliffe. It's a fix-up job, but it's a fix-up job for Shell Todd Oil. Now, let's be clear. The fact is, this company didn't get their timelines despite years of knowing how this legislation worked. As I said in an earlier contribution, they were involved in the select committee process on the original legislation. They had decades of warning when their permit was going to expire, but before they even put in their application, they ran off to the Cabinet and got them to draft this retrospective legislation to give them a retrospective consent for their marine application for the Maui gas field. So that's why I lay the blame at Shell Todd Oil Services. They should have got their they should have got their house in order. They should have got their timelines in order. This is a substantial company after all. And here, Parliament, using its awesome power to pass legislation, is fixing it for them. Now, crucially, nowhere in the documentation, nowhere in the Select Committee process, no one from Shell, remember, even fronted to the Select Committee, could actually tell us what the impacts of not passing this legislation was. Now, the Green Party was opposed in the first reading because there weren't any arguments for the necessity of passing this legislation. Now, sure, the platform could have shut down for a short while. It subsequently received its marine consent from the Environmental Protection Authority. We've got substantial gas storage facilities in New Zealand. Now, the spectre of stoves not working, lights not turning on was raised, but no one can actually explain how that possibly could be. And if, in fact, the only penalty would be that this company would itself face some financial penalties for not delivering their gas supply contracts. So those are two myths that we would like to challenge. But I would like to turn to why we are supporting this legislation, which is that it was improved substantially in the Select Committee. Now, two key areas that were improved were the specified timeframes and the completeness of applications. What this bill effectively does is allow, under the transitional provisions of the original EEZ Act, that a company who has an existing permit, whose expires, is allowed to continue for the period for which any appeals might take. Now, one of the crucial problems the way this amendment bill was originally drafted is that a company could put in an application the day before their permit expired, even if that permit had gone for 30, 35 years, knowing full well that under this new amended version of the EEZ, they could continue for as long as the process took, as long as any future appeals took. That's why Eugenie Sage and I and other members on the committee thought it was important that there were some specified timeframes around it. Now, there were various choices, 6, 9, 12 months. 6 months would have aligned with the RMA, but the committee in its wisdom thought it was good to go to 9 months, which is consistent with the EPA process around the EEZ Act legislation and the implementation of it. We think 9 months is it's a huge amount of time for a company to get its ducks in a row and make sure they've applied. Now, secondly, it was important that the completeness of the application was resolved and clarified in this. What we don't want to see is companies put in incomplete applications right before the deadline. We've seen previous applications, and there's only been a handful in front of the EPA under this new legislation, but I know the Trans-Tasman Resources case had 3 or more full pages of further additional questions requested by the EPA's Independent Decision-Making Committee because the application wasn't complete. In fact, an impact assessment statement for Anadarko's drilling off the Raglan coast under the transitional provisions of the original legislation weren't even provided to the EPA before they gave it the tick of approval to drill what was our deepest ever well close to the Maui's Dolphin Sanctuary, as a previous member has raised. So we thought it was important that a complete application had to be mentioned to clarify it. It's crystal clear for everyone involved. So, Mr Chair, we opposed this legislation in the first reading because of the inadequate information provided, because it simply looked like this company was running to the government before even putting in their application. Well, that's what they did, but it looked like a company didn't get their timelines in order. But since it's been improved, I'd like to once again acknowledge the committee members for the constructive, positive relationship on the committee. The legislation has been improved. It's now roughly analogous to similar provisions in the Resource Management Act. There are around 3 other companies which face this, but we're not talking for decades, so let's hope they don't learn the lessons of Shell Todd Oil, Mr Chair.